Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Backroom Podcast, episode 2 or 3. I don't know which one this is going to be, but you know what? I just want to say thank you guys for coming out and supporting the first episode, Man of Steel, with my boy Christian from Film Optics. We had a blast making that episode, but you know what? We're here back making another damn podcast. But you guys don't know, the Backroom Podcast is where I take a new friend or guest every single week and we just talk about a film that we either love or hate. But in this case, I think we both love this film and we're both talking about Shazam 2019. But before we get into it, Chris Diebs, do you want to introduce yourself, my man?
Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Chris. You can follow me on Twitter at Mr. Crockpod. I'm one of the co-hosts with my man Ryan for the Suit Up Geeks podcast. Check us out on Twitter at the Suit Up Geeks. We've got Justice League Snyder's Cut coming out next week. We've got I just saw that the Batman just finished wrap production today. So let's talk some DC, man.
No, yeah, dude, it's a very DC oriented, I would say, week/month almost. We got all this great stuff coming out. And what other way to talk about it than some of the better DC movies, in my opinion? And I'm just going to say straight off, I absolutely love Shazam. If you guys watched last week's episode, I made it my number 2 overall for the DC EU films, right behind Man of Steel. And honestly, I didn't know how I was going to feel about this movie when it first was announced because I had no idea who the character was in the beginning. And to see Zachary Levi being casted as a superhero seemed very odd to me, especially remembering him coming off of the role Chuck in like the mid to late 2000s and even the 10s, I think. And it's just a property that was kind of their Guardians of the Galaxy, I'd say. An IP that really wasn't known too well. And it was known until they did the name change. It used to be Captain Marvel, and then they changed his name to Shazam because Marvel decided to call one of their heroes Captain Marvel. And so now we have Shazam, and this film came out 2019 of April. Dude, I absolutely love this film. What was your first experience with this movie?
Yeah, I'll go back a little bit too because I love Chuck. Like I watched every single episode when it was released. Chuck Bartowski, what a phenomenal character! I'm a huge fan of Zachary Levi. I'll even go back further, like Tangled. His role in Tangled as Flynn Rider. That's we're talking about underrated DC movies. Talk about underrated Disney movies because Tangled is terrific, super super underrated. So I've always been a Zachary Levi fan. Even his role as Fandral in Thor: The Dark World and Thor was awesome. Although it was really sad to see him just get butchered by who was that? Kate Blanchett, Hella, I think.
Yeah, hella.
I don't even think he had a line in that film. He's gone. Like he was just like all of a sudden he's gone, and they like moved on from it like within a second. And I remember watching Thor Ragnarok, being like, "Wait, Virgil's gone." That's how much I love Zachary Levi. So this was one of those roles that he was born to play, man. I was kind of sad to see him go in the MCU, but if you didn't have that, you wouldn't see his rise in the DCEU. So my expectations for Shazam were pretty high. The marketing of this film was kind of interesting. It was, kind of built to be this buddy cop kids movie about superheroes, kids going through adolescence, learning how to utilize their superhero powers. But it was actually like everything but. And I think that's what kind of makes this film so interesting. It's kind of all over the place. It's got horror, it's got comedy, it's got warmth. It's all over the place.
Yeah, and I think you touched on it a little bit. When this film first came out, that was its biggest problem that I saw to people. It felt kind of inconsistent when it was going between wanting to be a family movie, a comedy movie, and a horror movie all at once. And I think that's because of the unique choice made by the director, who's David F. Sandberg, who before this was primarily known for horror. Two of the films you guys know him is for Annabelle Creation, which was the only good Annabelle film in the 3 films that came out, and then Lights Out, which I think was an underrated hit. So when I heard he was coming onto this project and having Zachary Levi play the main role. And then I started doing like some more research into Shazam. I watched a little bit of the late 70s TV show. I think it was in the late 70s, maybe early 70s. So I got a real good gist of this character, and it seems so odd that they were getting a character like this and mixing it with David F. Sandberg's type horror. And then after you watch Shazam, you get that horror aspect. I will admit that the film overall, whether I enjoyed it or not, did feel kind of finicky, because I would say about 50% of this film is a family oriented film. 25% of this is a goofy superhero comedy, and then 25% of this is a horror. When we get all the Dr. Savannah stuff, I would say is usually when David really dug deep into the horror aspect of this. And I'll be the first to admit, I really did like that scene with the seven sins when he went to go kill his father and brother in the tower room scene. I can't think of the word for conference room. Oh my god, why couldn't I think of conference room off the top of my head? And he completely slaughtered them. I thought it not only took me by surprise, but it took everybody else by surprise. And I was just like, wow, that was a really interesting choice to make in the middle of this film. Just completely slaughter everybody in this room for a PG-13 superhero film too, just made in 2019, not even that long ago. And I was like, you know what? It's just so bizarre and out there. I felt like it worked for Dr. Savannah and how they built him up. What were your like thoughts going in or coming out of that scene?
Yeah, I loved it. I loved every aspect of it because I am a truther when it comes to horror films. It's my favorite movie genre. So I loved how they played with that element a little bit, and I could see why. You talked about marketing, how like that's not what this film was built up to be at all. Like this was supposed to be this like uplifting, bright, fun family superhero film, and to get that kind of stuff, I don't think I knew that Sandberg was the director coming into it, so that was just a real pleasant surprise for me. I think timing was also an issue with this film. The DC EU was kind of in shambles. You look at what came before. Justice League was a mess. Aquaman was terrific, even though that's kind of a might be in the minority there. Wonder Woman was awesome, but you had Suicide Squad, BBS. So it was kind of in shambles. And I think what Shazam got right was the theme, similar to what Wonder Woman did, what Patty Jenkins did with Wonder Woman. Like the themes of family and love were so enriching, and the character development in Shazam was kind of one of the first things that stood out for me, and that really just oozed by its two leads, Billy and Freddie. What was that kid's name? Not Billy.
Jack Dylan Grazer?
My God, that guy just put on a showcase, man. He was so loving and charming. You just rooted for that kid every single scene. And how about what was her name? Darla, the cutie.
Darla,
Uh,
yeah.
my God, like this had just a full cast of characters that from the jump you truly rooted for, unlike the messes that came before it. And you got to think too, this movie came out right around the same time as Avengers Endgame. It was then you had before that, of course, Infinity War, Into the Spider Verse. So there was like some truly heavy hitters. With Marvel was just at its peak at the time, and I think there's a lot to love about Shazam, especially now that this movie came out before I was a father. Now that I am, and that I have a daughter, and it's kind of in that same tier as Ant-Man a little bit. It wouldn't be like top tier Marvel if this was in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It would probably be in that Ant-Man um, category, that tier, probably like above average. But there's something so endearing and lovable and charming about this film that actually this is actually one of my most rewatched films in the DCEU. I absolutely adore it, top to bottom.
No, yeah, honestly, Deebs, I pretty much agree with every point you've made. This is if we had to compare this to like a Marvel film, I would say this is closest to Ant-Man, which I love near and dear to my heart. Ant-Man's a great Marvel film and great family film. And just like you said before, I think what this movie does almost perfectly is casting. This movie got the right actors that had the right chemistry for these roles. I think even the what's the Hispanic boy's name? Pedro. Even Pedro to a certain extent I enjoy too. He didn't have much to do, but the actor did so good with his facial acting when he was in the family moments and then when they all turned into the Shazam family. I thought they all did the role that they needed to do perfectly. And going back to what you said before between Billy and Freddie, I think they have the best best friend, non-best friend relationship in this film. It's kind of iffy, like where they go in this back and forth. But dude, the chemistry between them, man, they are funny. Especially Jack Dylan Grazier's Freddie. Every single line the kid says is just an absolute banger and just some of the funniest things I've heard in the DCEU. And that's another thing. This movie is connected to the DCEU, but I think what it does so well is it doesn't really connect. Like the film, there's little subtle hints like the batarang or bullet that Freddy gets from Superman that was shot at him off the ground. Like it's nice little hints like that, and they throw in a little bit of a news head paper. I think of the events that happened in BVS with Doomsday, and I think they did the correct amount of connections to the previous films because like you said 2019 was a really iffy time for DC, and you can argue it still is, but back then it was arguably worse. The movies just weren't good. Shazam really wasn't being seen by a lot of people. Not enough people were talking about this because everyone just had the preconceived notion that it's DC. You know what? We'll just worry about it later, probably when it comes on DVD or whatever, because I think this movie didn't really make too much at the box office. It made roughly 400 million on a three $200 million budget. And when you really look at it, yeah, if the movie was made at a $200 million budget and made 400 million back, it's still quote unquote successful. But when you compare it to BVS, which almost did a billion, Aquaman did a billion literally a few months prior to this film. It's just insane. Even Justice League did 800 million or 700 million, one of the two. And when you look at this film, which I think is arguably one of the best to see and make 400 million and still greenlit a sequel, I find truly exciting because man, I just there's so much to love about this film. Let's take it back a little bit. Let's start at the beginning of the film. We start with Billy looking for his mother. He's on the run from the cops, going from foster home, just trying to find his true mother. And this is when I really feel like it digs the roots of what this movie wants to be. And it wants to be a family movie at the end of the day. And I think it really does succeed in this. And I didn't know where this mother storyline was taking us. I thought at face value, it really was just that his mother lost him accidentally, and then he just needs to find her throughout the entire film and the previous events to the film of growing up, and then we find out later that his mother intentionally left him there because she was a young 19-year-old mother, newly born, or no, she had the kid maybe 18, 17 years old because Billy seemed like 3 or 4 around the age. And for him to hear that your mother doesn't or purposely intended to lose you because she didn't want to take care of you and wanted you to make someone else's problem. And not only to know that, but to see that she really doesn't care even up until this day, that she doesn't feel bad, she doesn't feel guilty. She thinks what she did was the right choice, not only for him, which are you can argue that it was the best choice for him, but even the best choice for her is just insane. And I think it's perfect that you're on here, Deebs, because I want to get your thoughts and opinions on what you thought about that scene before being a father, and then going back to it now and watching it as a father.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to, what this movie was supposed to be. Like you look at it from a visual perspective, it's bright, colorful. You have a superhero film, but when you dig deeper, it's truly a very dark and super terrible world this kid Billy is living in. It tackles serious issues like poverty and abuse and abandonment from his perspectives. And that scene when Billy, finally faces the reality that he wasn't supposed to be found, that his mom decidedly left him. That was supposed to be like this, like, he found his mom, and it was supposed to be this super happy moment. And sure enough, Billy, I think, then was like um, what's the word I'm looking for? He actually felt bad for his mother, not himself. So there was almost like a character tonal shift there, and that that scene was really powerful in that I think it just made you root for Billy even more. That was kind of his like aha moment in terms of growing as a character and becoming much more mature quicker than he ever should have been moving forward in the film, but also as an adolescent. This kid Billy has been through a lot, and to go from home to home and school to school, man, that's like one of the leading variables to like homelessness and poverty and all that kind of stuff. So that Billy has had has faced a steep hill growing up, and when you see that moment where he realized that he didn't actually have someone looking for him, was just gut wrenching, man. And that kind of like pays tribute to what we kind of just talked about, was like how this film was supposed to be so colorful and uplifting. And you have that moment, it was like kind of somber and dark. And this film really tackling some truly harsh realities and themes that you don't normally see in a superhero film.
No, yeah, I completely agree. And like, I'll even admit, I don't tear up very easily, but I felt like getting choked up in that scene very well because I'm just like, wow, this movie is hitting us from all different fronts on the family front. We've got Billy trying to find his mom and then eventually finding that his mother never really intended for him to come back. And then we've got Billy with the new family that becomes the Shazam family. He's very forceful to not be a part of that family, but they're very caring and open arms, kind of the opposite of what he was to his mother. But he was staying so away from them because he wanted to be with his mother. And then we've got Dr. Savannah, who never was on good terms with his father or brother, who eventually kills them about midway through the movie. So this film carries a lot of baggage when it comes to family. And dude, two out of the three moments for family usually doesn't end well in this movie. Billy leaves his mom and feels bad for her. And I feel like that's another good thing about this film. I just kind of realized now is the fact that Billy wasn't crying because he was hurt of what she said, but he was more hurt and crying because he felt really bad for his mother and just truly felt that she didn't need to deserve this life because it seems like she's in a very abusive household at that very moment. So he feels that he's sad for her because she's in a much different and worse situation than he is because he can go back to a family that was more than open arms to him and literally tried everything to keep him at their house. There was literally five other children there, all welcome. There was not a single person that didn't want him there, and they made that very clear when he first went there. Darla ran up to him and hugged him instantly. The other sister, she was just super nice and friendly. Freddie was just outgoing and charismatic and funny to him. And then you've got Pedro, who was a little bit on the shyer side, which was a nice little mix, but he never did anything. He gave those nice remarks, facial features to him that kind of insinuated that, yeah, you know what, man, you're cool, and then kind of give them that brotherly bond in that way. And then you've got the nerdy kid. I forgot his name, but man, he's also really funny, and he was more of the laugh factor in the family rather than having more of the emotional connection. But I felt like they all had a nice balance to Billy's sad and depressive side. Deebs, what did you think about the main core Shazam family members?
I mean, you've got to start off with Freddie. I mean, you nailed it about Billy. But my gosh, another super emotional moment for me was Freddy. That there was a really powerful scene where Freddy, like, he's normally sarcastic and quirky and full of life and funny, and you see the moment when Freddy admits that he's envious of Billy's abilities, was really truly heartbreaking. Just and he had a disability. Just he had that on top of that. So you have a character that's completely isolated in Billy. Then you have a character with disability in Freddy. That's kind of these are characters that are kind of underdogs. It's kind of an underdog story in a sense. But that scene when Freddy admits that he's envious of Billy's abilities was really gut wrenching as well, because what does Freddy want? His entire purpose, I think, in this film was, or in his character, was he wanted to be seen. He's gone from home to home to home to home, and how many times did he say in the film, like, no one ever sees me? He even building up that relationship with Billy, and he's finally got a friend in Billy, and then in this movie, Billy actually starts to push him away. So Freddy's character was just super, super memorable. What was it, Zach Dylan Grazer? I just can't give enough credit for that kid, and I just loved how the family, at the end of the day, they all got powers, and you see them finally find the lair that they were looking for at the beginning of the film, and that was just a really cool kind of moment that of these characters trying to find a home, and they don't have a home, but they have each other, and it's just a beautiful sentiment.
No, yeah, and I still say that this is easily one of the more emotional stories in the DCEU. I guess you can argue Man of Steel has maybe just as emotion, but this is the most, I feel like, relatable emotion, or an emotion that not too many people have seen. Because honestly, I don't know what goes on with the foster care system. And I remember when this film first started coming out and coming around, a lot of people were talking about that this is sort of like what it's like to go through foster care system. And it's hard to watch that, but to see them have that family at the end, it's just so rewarding and heartwarming at the end of the film. And I feel like, that's why I go back to a lot of, it's not even about the action or the superhero stuff. A lot of it is the emotional drive that I like to go back to. It reminds me that even though you might not have blood family, or blood family might not exist or not want to be a part of your life, you can still find family outside of the blood. Like, there's some friends that you'll have for the rest of your life. And I think this movie is the perfect example of that. And I think that's why it ranks so high for me when it comes to my DC overall ranking. But that's only half of the film. What did you think about? I don't even know where to start. There's just so much to talk about in this film. I'm just going to start with Zachary Levi in the role of Shazam. What did you first think when he was casted? I know we touched on it a little bit before, but after seeing him, do you see him as a quote unquote superhero? Are you more excited for the Shazam film or the sequel because of him? Like, what goes on to your head when you think about Levi now compared to when you thought about him in Chuck, let's say?
Yeah, man. I remember when they were revealing like set photos, and Zachary Levi was, Chuck. This guy's was like rail thin in the show, and to think of Zachary Levi as this like comic book hero in film, it was first that, like, all right, like mentally, like he was clearly meant for the role, but physically, I remember seeing set photos, or him lifting weights and just getting huge for this role. I have vivid memories of that. But as Zachary Levi as a character, like, I think that's kind of one of the strengths of what this film is. Like, this movie deserves so much credit for pulling off an enjoyable characterization of Shazam, who's a child with lightning powers that turns him into a superhuman adult. Like, it's a very original concept, but I don't think it's that easy to pull off. It's having an adult that sounds like a kid. was and having that be Zachary Levi was a no brainer. I think it works seamlessly.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. I was definitely caught up when I found out that one, I didn't know who Shazam really was until this film came out. But when I found out that it was just a kid that transforms between a child and an adult, I got really worried that the child was actually, or the child actor and Billy was gonna get overlooked in this film because one, I'm sure they wanted to focus on more of the Shazam and adult side, especially since they named the film off him. And two, getting Zachary Levi, who was a pretty notable actor when he got casted in that for other projects, not more of the superhero stuff. But I was really nervous about that going in. But I think Zachary Levi played such a good role that I was kind of felt like I was watching the kid who was playing Billy in that role. And I just still find it insane when I watch this movie. I'm like, dude, I think Zachary Levi does such a great job at just portraying how I think Billy would react. I can't say how he would react because I really don't know. But when I picture Billy reacting to getting these superpowers, I do see the way that Zachary Levi performed in this film. And he captured that childlike innocence pretty much perfectly in this movie, crazy enough. But I definitely think that was the biggest concern for a lot of people coming into this film. And there was a big debate because you can argue that in Chuck, he had more of a childlike demeanor, I guess, when it came to the comedy of that show. But this is just going all in the childlike drama and the childlike comedy. And I think the perfect scene that displays this is when they discover their powers, which is easily one of my favorite scenes, or I would say comedic scenes in this movie. I thought it kind of pictured something that we don't see or really ever have seen often in a superhero flick, and that's them kind of discovering their powers. We saw it in Man of Steel, but it didn't seem like he really struggled too much when he started learning how to fly and jump for the first time in that film. In this one, you kind of go through the trial and error of trying to figure out what your powers are, because when people seem to get their powers, most of the time they're never given a powers manual on what type of powers they have, what they can do. And I think this entire movie does that between learning when he can fly, having heat vision or not. Mr. Captain Sparkle Fingers as my favorite name in the film. But yeah, this film plays a lot on the childlike innocence of being a superhero, and I think that's kind of where it drags it down just a tad bit for me. I feel like in the film they focus a lot more on him just enjoying being a superhero, and then all of a sudden he's just forced into being a superhero, which usually is the type of thing where people get their powers but they usually refuse to use it, and then they're forced into using it. In this case, it's more of someone who doesn't know their powers, they're being a little bit sloppy, they're stopping robbers unironically when they're trying to get beer to drink. And it was funny for a while, but I feel like they stayed on that a little bit too long. But other than that, I guess you can say that Dr. Savannah was not the best villain, but I think he was a good enough villain for what the movie was trying to do. I don't really have too many complaints when it comes to Shazam. Deebs, do you have like any pressing concerns or like some things you wish you could fix about the film that would just make it that extra better for you?
Well, I guess it wasn't that big of an action film. I guess that's why people might slight it a little bit. But this is a film that's not meant to be this like cinematic masterpiece. But for what it is, I think the movie absolutely delivered on its purpose. It's supposed to be, a fun family movie that is lighthearted. You can go watch. You can turn your brain off and have fun and laugh and cry all at the same time. It has some really, truly good messages about the importance of family. I thought Dr. Savannah was pretty good. I thought there were some really interesting parallels between Billy and Thad, because you see in the intro, like Thad is shown to be this like sympathetic character. They show him to start out, in this like kind of hopeful and positive light, and then you get Billy, who's kind of similar in some respects. I guess the main difference there was Thad just wanted to gain power to get uh, become more powerful than his father and his brother. Whereas Billy, I don't even know if he wanted powers, to be honest. But I thought that was a really interesting dynamic. You saw them both kind of have like these like toys and objects that they're similar in some respects. Like you have Doctor Savannah or Thad when he was young with a magic 8 ball, and you had Billy with, I think it was a compass, and both of those were like just symbolic because it represented them holding on to who they were, and I think the compass like was a way for Billy to kind of move him in the direction of where he needed to go. But for Thad, you always saw that like anger built inside of him. So I thought Dr. Savannah and um, Billy Batson, I thought those two definitely rivaled each other in a really well done manner. Regarding what could be fixed, I don't know, man. Sometimes movies are just meant to be escapism. Sometimes they're just meant to be enjoyed. Um, I think this is a film that definitely tackled a lot of truly adult themes, and I think top to bottom they nailed it when it comes to the importance of family and giving you two characters in Billy and Freddie that you truly love. And like I said, this is definitely among the top, one of my favorite DCEU movies. It's definitely underrated in the sense of comic book films, and I don't think it's talked about enough.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. And I think a lot of it has to do with the way this movie was pushed out to the public, in a sense that 2 weeks before this film came out, Fandango did a one day only all day screening of this movie. It was the most bizarre and out there thing, and I think they were selling the tickets for cheaper too. So it was so weird, it was so random, no one knew about it. And it's unfortunate because I do think that because Fandango did that, it caused this movie to go down a little bit when it comes to criticism, how people are going to perceive it, because people were already finding out 2 3 weeks before it came out through theatrical about it being a good movie or it being a really bad movie. It's not what you think it is. So I think that preconceived notion that everyone got really damaged this film, because just like you, Deebs, this is one of my favorite DC films. It's my second favorite one. And a lot of that has to do with this third act too. I think this is a really entertaining third act for the film. I wasn't sure if they were going to do the Shazam family. I wasn't sure if I would feel good if they did it, if that makes sense, because I was afraid that they were going to rush it. But I think they introduced the Shazam family almost perfectly in this film. I think they all get their nice little moments between having so I should explain the way Shazam works. I don't know the exact words, but each letter is an individual power from a god. So
Mhm.
people get lightning, speed, flying. And so when they were separated as the Shazam family, they all turned into a Shazam, but they all got one individual power. So I thought it was really cool to see how they would all react to getting that individual power. I think Darla got the speed, so when she was first trying to figure it out, she was kind of like Billy. She was kind of messing around, just having fun before the intensity started. Freddie got flying because I think that was one power that he's always wanted to do. He loves flying, and to see him have that ability to fly just put a smile on my face, because it was a kid, Billy, or no, Freddie, sorry, not Billy, Freddie just had it hard. He was disabled. I don't remember if they mentioned in the movie what happened to him, but throughout the film, you just feel bad for the kid. He gets picked on. He was going from house to house, and then he finally found this family too, sort of like Billy. And to finally see him get something that he's kind of obsessed about and always wanted about, the one thing that would kind of switch his life around and he got, I think it was really heartwarming for him to get the flying ability. Pedro got super strength. The Asian kid got lightning. And what did Mary get? Do you remember what Mary got, Deebs?
I do not. I have to rewatch it.
Yeah, so they all got an individual power that kind of related to them. Pedro got strength because he never felt strong. He struggles in school, stuff like that. So I feel like their powers connected to their characters almost perfectly in this film and really added another level and sense of family and them coming together by sharing this amazing ability together. And you see that at the end when Billy sits at the dinner table right before the credits roll, and you see on his face that he finally accepts them as his family. And I was curious how they were going to defeat Dr. Savannah, and I'm kind of surprised they did it kind of smart. Like it wasn't a big beat 'em up brawl or anything. He made, I forgot which of the seven sins it was, but he made the sin feel small enough to make him come out and want to fight him himself. And once Savannah loses all of the sins, he loses the power of the seven sins, and each sin that leaves his body, he becomes weaker. So I thought that was a cool and smart way of Billy to defeating Savannah and capturing the seven deadly sins. That wasn't an all-out beat 'em up like we saw in Man of Steel or Batman versus Superman or even any DC film previous to that. So I commend the film for taking a step back and using wisdom and wits to outsmart a villain that's should be way smarter than him, but that's besides the point. Deebs, what did you think about this entire third act and how Dr. Savannah was eventually defeated?
It was fine. I think the purpose of Savannah was truly just to kind of set up the Shazam family. I enjoyed kind of the monster henchmen. I think they were horrific, but I don't know if like what it didn't. It was CGI, but it felt like something different than that.
They didn't add enough character to them, I think.
It was interesting how they were handled, but it was kind of a I wouldn't say anticlimactic, but in the end, it was really all about the family, um, coming together and getting their powers. That was kind of like the big shock that the film finally went that direction. At first, I didn't think they would go that route, especially in the first film. Probably more so like in the sequel. But that was a really cool moment in that third act when they all became they all got their powers. So the third act was good. I have really no complaints. It's a film that's about heart. It's a film about the importance of family and you choose your family. I think that was kind of like the whole moment of this third act was you look at Thad and the Savannas, they're a biological family and they hate each other. Like it is a terrible, terrible family. And then you have Billy, um, who is searching for his mom, and it's really all about like you choose your family. And that moment where they all become powers, like that was kind of like the moment where they become family, and that was just a very kind of inspiring moment.
No, yeah, and like you said, this third act feels like it was just really to set up the Shazam family and to kind of set up the sequel, which in theory I think it really just meant to do at the end of the day. So I think we can just say the movie really did succeed at doing what it wanted while also pleasing fans, because I know sometimes with these superhero films, the third acts and sequels or just trying to put sequel baiting stuff into a film can feel very forced. So I appreciate that they didn't really make anything feel forced in this film. It accomplished what it wanted. But that just leaves us to Deebs. Would you recommend this film to people?
Yes, like I said, this is a DC movie that got it right. It's a movie that isn't perfect, but it's got a ton of heart, led by truly amazing characters. I think Shazam benefits largely from knowing what it wants to be. It's essentially big, which I love with superheroes. It's this joyous movie, but it's also got some horror elements. It's got some truly adult themes. The two main characters here, Billy and Freddie, are the ticket here. They're both compelling. They've got real depth. The entire movie is just like feel good character study about what if you're a child and you got superpowers, what would you do with them? And in that, if you just look at it like that, it was extremely successful. I 100% recommend it to everybody.
No, yeah, guys. Honestly, I really agree with Deebs. I think this is the last batch of where I'm gonna be consistently positive about a DC film. But you know what? I thought this was a great film. I think this movie has a lot for people, a lot for everyone. It has the horror aspect for people that really do love horror. It's got the emotional family drama while also being a superhero film. So I know a lot of people had that complaint, but I really do appreciate that it has the basis for what David Sandberg came from while also transitioning to what his future seems to be at this point. And I thought that was a chef's kiss there. And I really do like this film. I highly recommend this. This film is a straight B plus, I would say for me, 8.5 if you're looking at it on numbers. But Deebs, I want to thank you so much for coming on to the Backroom Podcast and being this week's episode. Where can we find you, my man?
Oh man, I'm honored, man. This was a blast. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Crockpot. Check out the Suit Up Geeks podcast at the Suit Up Geeks on Twitter. We do tons and tons of Marvel and DC, Star Wars content. I definitely want to check that out. And just, man, thanks for having me on.
No, yeah, thanks so much, Deebs. Dude, I don't know why I didn't think about doing Shazam when we talked about it. I think this was a perfect film for me to talk about, especially for DC. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you guys so much for leaving another listen, and of course, a like and comment if you really do feel so, and a subscribe. Thank you guys so much, and see you on the next one. Peace.